Hello and welcome to Realities Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Fonseca Rendeiro. I want to be very quick with the introduction today. As you know from previous programs, we've talked about Matthew Dons and his struggle with cancer. Well, today on the program, he joins us from Tokyo, and I just want to remind you, as I will again at the end, Matthew, two T's, Matthew Dons, DONS.org. If you go there, you can donate to the GoFundMe campaign. Please do. And now, let's talk. Let's listen to Matthew. Here, so we're recording, and that changes everything, doesn't it? In some ways.
Well, sort of. I mean, ideally, I'd like to say some stuff that would be useful to either someone who, God forbid, finds they've got cancer, or maybe knows someone with cancer. Maybe has a family member with cancer. So if we could talk about that kind of stuff, that would be good.
Yeah, and I also think your experience it's your experience, and I want people, there's something to be learned and appreciated in everything. Maybe, I don't know. I'm going to learn by listening to you. So maybe we started as a sort of podcast. I mean, in terms of, people who are listening right now, hopefully this is not your first ever, but that can happen, right? The first time that you hear this program, the first time that you hear from Matthew. So first of all, let's acknowledge I'm here, I'm Mark, and there in Japan, there's Matthew.
Yeah, I'm here in Tokyo, in western part of Tokyo.
Yeah, and I'm, as many know, I'm here in Amsterdam, right? So, and in the previous podcast, we talked about, or I talked about you and replayed old audio, just as to try to put things in a little bit of context in terms of how we've known each other. Which of course you can't share the text messages and so forth, but you can share in the audio. So, Matthew, now we come to this. To begin with, I mean, I wanted to ask you reached out in July, actually. That's when you told me, you wrote to me and you said, terrible news, cancer, right? I don't know if it serves any good, but I'm asking anyway. Tell me about the when you found this out, what was going on?
So, I found out a very short time ago that I have cancer, and it's terminal cancer, so it's incurable. And I found out basically, I think it was the middle of June. I mean, time is kind of compressed and stretched, and weird things have been happening. I can't remember a lot of my life before the cancer diagnosis now, which sounds ridiculous, but I live in Japan. Generally, I was back in the UK with my family, visiting my parents, and I got sick on the way to the UK. I got a chest infection. I went to a doctor. So in England, we have a GP system, which is a general practitioner system, a bit like the family doctor system in America. So I went to the sort of local doctor. Got some medicine for the chest infection. That gave me a bad reaction with my stomach, and some tests were recommended, and they found a tumor, a big tumor. And the guy who found the tumor said it was the last thing he was expecting to find in someone of my age. He was expecting to find maybe a couple of these little things called polyps, which in rare cases develop into tumors. And it seems that, that is, that's what's happened to me. A polyp developed into a tumor became cancerous. And a few days after that, I had a scan, and the results of the scan said it's spread. And my cancer spread a lot. And it's particularly spread to the lymph node, so that's your lymphatic system, which sort of moves around the lymph fluid. It spread to the liver a lot, and it spread to something called the peritoneum, which I had never even heard of, and is like a membrane that goes over the abdomen and sort of protects your organs. And it's that cancer in the peritoneum, which makes my cancer particularly difficult to treat. So yeah, that's how I found out really, and we're only at the end of August now, so it was sort of mid June, possibly beginning of July even. No, maybe it was the beginning of July. So I've really, I've known for 2 months, 2 and a bit months. So
it's even like some concepts which you're now used to, like you said, time stretches in some ways. The whole term "my cancer," like that. There was no "my cancer," right? And now there is, and now, or I mean, it's not a term that I would ever hear you say.
Absolutely. I mean, it's when cancer is such a powerful word, it's not actually a very good word. I have a very limited understanding of medical matters, although I do understand sort of science and technology quite well, and I sort of learn pretty quickly. But really, cancer just means a situation where, for some reason, some DNA has got damaged in some cells or in a cell, and that's causing unregulated growth. So basically, the thing's growing and growing. The cells are doubling and doubling and doubling, and they don't have the message that's in all cells that tells the cell to die. So we're very familiar with our skin cells dying all the time, for example. But of course, all the cells in our body die very regularly, replenished with new ones. That's one of the things that keeps us alive and healthy, because our body is under attack all the time from things like light, from things like air. I mean, breathing. You get massive exposure to free radicals that damage the DNA. So cancer is it's a peculiar thing, because it's your body, it's in your body, it's part of your body, but your body doesn't recognize that and attack it. And really the immune system of the human body doesn't attack the cancer. That's why cancer is such an issue, and that has some consequences. It kind of reverses our normal idea of like how we get well, because usually when you're sick and you go to hospital, let's say you go to hospital with something quite serious like pneumonia, you're getting a lot of treatment. Some of that's treating the pneumonia, some of it's treating the symptoms of the pneumonia to give your body a fighting chance so that your immune system can then attack the pneumonia. But it seems the cancer, at least at the moment, that's not really an option. Now, there's an emerging science called immunotherapy, which is sort of dealing with your own immune system to try and help your immune system attack things that it's not currently attacking. So, an example of immunotherapy would be some of these allergy treatments where someone's allergic to a certain type of protein, for example, a famous one being maybe a protein component in gluten, and they're getting an allergic reaction where their body is not producing the sort of the correct response, and immunotherapy could sort of potentially help in that kind of situation. So for cancer, there are these emerging immunotherapies, unproven and very, very difficult to prove, to robustly prove, but that seem to work for some people. So that's one of the things I'm looking into at the moment, is the possibility of having immunotherapy. But yeah, so the reason cancer itself is not a good word is because, as far as I can tell, it seems that all the different cancers, the only thing they really have in common is this, at least in terms of treatment, the common point is they have this unmitigated cell growth. But the problem is the treatments are all very different, and I, for example, didn't know anything about cancer before I was diagnosed, and every day we hear good news about cancer. Basically, in most countries, every day there's good news about cancer. The improvement in treatment over, let's say, the last 30 years has been incredible. It seems to be one of the fastest improving areas of medicine. But it's very important to understand that those treatments are very, very, very specific. So there are a couple of hundred varieties of cancer, and when cancer spread to other parts of the body, that's a whole different thing. So I have bowel cancer, it spread to my liver. I do not have liver cancer, I have what's called secondary bowel cancer in the liver. Also, my cancer spread to the lymph nodes. That's very different from someone who has a lymphatic cancer, like Hodgkinson's disease. I think Hodgkinson's lymphoma.
Yes.
It's been quite a struggle just getting a grip to all the language, because there are so many technical terms out there, and it's important because different things have different meanings, and there's a lot of misinformation about cancer. There are a lot of cancer myths. One thing that's become very, very clear to me just over the past couple of months is that a lot of people with cancer do not understand their exact diagnosis. I don't know if that's because doctors haven't explained well, or if those people are in denial, or if it's. I mean, it is a lot to understand. So someone may think they have liver cancer if they had lung cancer that spread to the liver. They do not have liver cancer. They have secondary lung cancer of the liver, and the treatments that are relevant for liver cancer are not relevant to that person. Cancer, basically, the only proven cure of cancer is surgery, and really the only proven thing to kind of slow down cancer or possibly even shrink it is the chemotherapy. Chemotherapy has a fearsome reputation. I haven't started it yet. I'm starting it next week. I believe the reputation is justified, because the idea of chemotherapy is that you're taking in poison. I mean, actual poisons, not poisons in some kind of fluffy metaphorical sense, but actual, metal-based poisons, for example. They're going to harm all of your body, but because cancer is growing rapidly, the cells are doubling rapidly, it's kind of more hungry for nutrition, and it sort of grabs more of the poison. And when you're having chemotherapy, it's in a very, very controlled way, and you get a lot of drugs along with it to manage the side effects. But what the oncologists, what the cancer doctors and the chemotherapy nurses are trying to do is give you doses of chemotherapy that your body can stand, but that are a struggle for the cancer. So the cancer cells die, and if you get positive results, that could be that it halts the cancer, at least for the time being. If you're very lucky, it could even shrink some of the tumours. So, at the moment, 2016, essentially the only proven treatment for cancer is surgery, and the only proven thing to slow it down or stop the spread is the chemotherapy. There's an emerging group of treatments that are sometimes called like biological treatments, and they're things that can target cancer directly. So they might be a drug that tells the cancer cells to destroy themselves, or that tells the cells around the cancer to cut off the blood supply to the cancer. So an example of that would be the molecular targeting agents. So for example, when I have chemotherapy, I'm going to be having a mixture of chemotherapy poisons and a molecular targeting agent that actually tries to target the cancer directly, because the big problem with chemotherapy is that it damages healthy tissue as well. So yeah, I mean that's my situation. When you talk about cancers, you talk about the stage, which is sort of how far it's progressed. You know, is it a small isolated tumor? Has the tumor spread through whatever organ it's in? Has the tumor spread out of the organ it's in? Or in my case, which is called stage 4 cancer, the cancer is actually spread to like further bits of the body. And stage 4 cancer is often terminal, which means, you know, it's going to end your life. And it's often what you know, it's sort of treated as incurable. Doesn't mean it's without hope. There is you know, what with cancer, while you're alive you have hope. Basically, there's a possibility chemotherapy could slow it down, or even shrink tumors. Cancer can be sometimes what's called be in remission, which is sort of it's being controlled by the various treatments you're getting, and you're alive. So, you know, even in cases where people have terminal cancer, there's absolutely reason to be hopeful. Not reason to be optimistic, but I heard a good definition of kind of comparing hope and optimism is that hope is the idea that it's worth fighting on. Optimism is just the idea things will magically get better themselves. So kind of hope is like a deeper thing, maybe. You know, hope means it's worth pursuing treatments while you're alive. It means it's worth doing chemotherapy even if the side effects are very, very tough. So that's the sort of position I'm in. I'm about to start chemotherapy. From what I've heard, it's going to be very brutal, but it's the best chance I've got of extending my life for a while. Let's say.
Yeah.
So does that make sense so far?
Yeah. I mean, you know, one of the things you're showing us is in terms of what your day-to-day is coming up, what you're working on. One of the things, you know, one of the biggest things, and that's going to be, chemotherapy is the next giant project. And of course, I know there's lots of other things that I kind of want to ask you about, but that's what I was curious about also is, you know, that when you get informed about what's going on, when they discover this in the UK, you know, that the priority list, you know, I'm sure you had one before. It was besides visiting your family on vacation, which is a damn good one. But then how this all changes what you need to do and your list of your to-do list.
Absolutely. And I'm currently, you know, I need to be absolutely focused on the chemotherapy and getting through it, and not sort of saying these side effects are too bad, I want to give up now, because that would be very, very bad. But I've essentially got 3 priorities that are, what's the word, like diametrically opposed, sort of at 90 degrees to each other. I mean, one is to spend every available second with my family, particularly my 2 young children. One is to engage with the treatment as much as possible, look at different treatment possibilities, make sure I'm well informed. And the third one is do some kind of preparations for when I'm no longer here. You know, what can I do for my family? And, you know, and this is where it gets emotional, very, very emotional, obviously very, very heavy, and potentially in conflict with the second priority of really focusing on the treatment, because to get, you know, what can I say? So to get through the side effects of, let's say, surgery, for example, or chemotherapy, or if you're someone who can have radiation therapy, you know, those things have very, very heavy side effects, and there's a very strong body of evidence that the patient's attitude has a big effect on how well they stand the side effects. So,
Okay.
we might say there's no evidence that your mind affects your cancer, but your mind certainly affects how you deal with the side effects. So I've got to be sort of somehow focus 100% on fighting through. I've had surgery 2 weeks ago. The recovery is very tough initially, although now looking back, it seems like this tiny thing. But at the time, it was a living hell in hospital. The first week after surgery, I had got some pneumonia from the surgery. I had some issues that made the recovery slow, which is why I spent longer in hospital. So I've got to sort of focus 100% on getting through the treatment. On the other hand, it seems very, very important to set up some things for after I'm gone. So one thing, for example, is I've made some audio recordings for my children. I need to do some videos for them. It's been recommended to me to do birthday cards for them for maybe the next 10 years or whatever. And those are heavy, heavy, heavy things to even think about for a fraction of a second. I was sat there on the hospital bed with my MP3 recorder, recording messages to my son, trying to teach him all the things that I'd have wanted to teach him over, the next few years.
Wow.
Very, very heavy things, and completely at odds with a positive attitude of, I'm going to get through this. The chemotherapy is going to, I'm going to be in that 5% of people where the chemotherapy shrinks the tumours down, and then the surgeon says, now we can perform the liver surgery on you. And, I need that kind of attitude. I need to be able to tell myself, the chemotherapy is going to work for me. It's going to prolong the life. It's going to prolong the life to an extent that other cancer treatment options become available, because they are becoming available. So every 6 months or every year or whatever, new things become available. But also old things get considerably better as the body of knowledge increases. Chemotherapy being a good example, it's improved massively. The control of the side effects has improved massively. There are now some chemotherapies that, at least from what I've heard, are really not so bad for certain cancers. They're quite, obviously tough, but you can get through them. So that's been a very, very big challenge at the moment, is these three different priorities. One is spend absolute maximum time with my children. Number two is be absolutely focused on the treatment. I've been doing a lot of research. I've pursued a lot of sort of second opinions, going to other specialists. I've obviously read a great deal online. I'm trying to read scientific papers that I don't really understand. But the third thing is, what preparations can I put in place now that are going to make things better particularly for my family when I'm not here? The birthday cards, the audio recordings, the video, the photos.
By the way, out of curiosity, where did that recommendation come from?
These are the friends who knew people who have cancer. Cancer is very common.
Yes.
It's in England, the statistic is something like 1 in 3 people will be affected by cancer, and that basically means have cancer or have a family member with member with cancer. So it's very likely our listener knows someone has a friend with cancer, or a friend, maybe a family member with cancer, or a friend with a family member with cancer. So it is common. So now there are good suggestions out there. The UK has very good established cancer charities that have that don't do treatment, but they have sort of medical professionals who can explain your treatment to you, but also who have information about how do you talk to children about cancer. I've had to tell my son I might not be around for a lot longer. He's 7 years old. He's pretty mature, but still, that's children around sort of 7 or 8 years old are only just beginning to understand that death is forever. at least currently, let's say. Hopefully not in the future.
What are those conversations like now? I'm sure. Oh, actually, does he ask a lot of questions and
Well, I mean, first of all, I haven't been here for a couple of weeks. I got out of hospital literally a couple of days ago. He did come and visit me a couple of times in hospital. But yeah, I've been sort of having those questions sort of questions that have been coming up over the past couple of days. A big question is always why. Why has this happened? Why are we unlucky? And I point out all the ways that we've been very lucky in the past, and this is an unlucky thing. I don't believe there is a why of cancer. I mean, philosophically, I'm 100% convinced there is no why. Some cancers seem to be lifestyle related. Some seem to have a genetic element. In the future, the genetic side will be understood a lot more. The genetic side already, there's been big advances that are suggesting what treatments may work for people before they've actually had the treatment. So when he asks why, I try and give my honest answer, which is I don't believe there is a why. It's just bad luck, and as a family, I think we've had a lot of good luck in the past. I don't think they balance out. I just think, life is full of adversity and opportunity. There's no rhyme or reason to it. We're just here in a situation. Obviously he asks about treatment. I haven't talked a lot with him yet about chemotherapy and the fact that the times between my chemotherapy, I'm going to be possibly having a lot of heavy side effects. It might be very difficult for me to play with the children, for example, because you get this thing called fatigue, and fatigue is basically a deep tiredness in your bones and muscles that is not relieved by rest. So that's the definition of fatigue, is that you can wake up after a good night's sleep and feel absolutely exhausted. It could sort of hit you later in the day, you're very, very exhausted, and the rest doesn't make any difference. So fatigue is poorly understood. It's one of those things on the edge of medicine where they don't really understand the cause. There are some ideas of how to handle it, but again, it's very new stuff. So that's a conversation I'm going to be having in the next few days. Is sort of explaining that I'm going to be having this very, very strong medicine to help me try and live a bit longer, but in between the times of the medicine, I may not, be in a good position.
Maybe you can invent some other way to play. I don't know.
Absolutely. And just I might better read with him, for example. I might have the energy for that, but just not the energy to go and play in the park.
Right.
So those conversations are very difficult, and of course I've been having some of those conversations with my parents as well. Sort of, I'm not necessarily going to be around for much longer. The prognosis is pretty bad. After the first kind of 4 treatments of chemotherapy, I'll then have a scan to see what the cancer's doing, and it may be that it's got much worse or slightly worse, or it stayed the same, or it's improved, or even that it's sort of improved dramatically, opening up the option for surgery. So until that point, I don't really know what's happening in my body. There's not really any way to tell. I'm current. This sounds crazy, but currently I'm sort of, I guess I'd be described as symptom free. I don't have any symptoms. In that, my liver seems to be functioning okay. Obviously I've had major surgery to remove the original tumor, and I've been recovering from that. And yeah, my body is very different because of that. For example, I have a colostomy bag, which means that they, when they remove the tumor from the colon, sometimes they can reconnect the colon, but that depends on where else the cancer spread to. And in my case, the surgeon sort of saw, because of the extent of the spread, it was dangerous to do that. So that's something, getting used to. But other than that, I do not have cancer symptoms. I've lost a lot of weight over the past few months, but that's completely in line with spending a lot of time in hospital, having a lot of days when I couldn't eat. That's not the same as someone who has like wastage because of cancer.
Do you have a normal appetite these days?
Pretty much, yeah. Just in the last couple of days, it's been pretty much normal. After my surgery, I had no appetite at all. In fact, from the point that I found out I had cancer, my appetite basically went to zero. I could eat. Had somewhere read the advice to like write down everything you eat and made sure I was getting enough calories. So I wrote down the time, because literally if I didn't write it down, I just would forget to eat or whatever. But again, that was, I feel that was a psychological thing. I was sleeping very badly. I still am sleeping pretty badly, but better than at that time. But it was the appetite loss, because I had this absolutely devastating news, not appetite loss because of some clinical thing that was happening. So it's very odd that my body is sore from the surgery. I actually had two surgeries. So I had one surgery to remove the tumor. I had another surgery to put a pipe in from my shoulder towards my heart, which is going to be for the chemotherapy. That's called a central line. So that's kind of, there's a big lump where the port is that the chemotherapy is going to go into, because my chemotherapy is going to be a drip. It's going to be a 48-hour drip every 2 weeks. But other than that, I don't have the symptoms. I feel tired because I'm sleeping badly. I'm obviously thinking a lot about a lot of heavy things every day, but I don't have any kind of, exhaustion from cancer or anything like that. So yeah, it's a very strange situation, and it's hard to believe it's real.
Do you do anything to rest your mind? It just seems like you've been thinking of a million things, right? Like all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in hospital, I was, listening to podcasts, watched a lot of YouTube. I actually found that a friend of mine had given me one of these colouring in books for adults, kind of called meditative colouring in books, and I actually found that worked quite well. Just sort of sitting in a quiet place, concentrating on something that's quite sort of physical. So yeah, that's what I've done so far. Walking is a big thing. That's going to be a very big thing with the chemotherapy, because gentle exercise seems to be one of the best ways to deal with the fatigue. Somehow during the exercise, your body does whatever it needs to do to reduce that fatigue, whereas resting has no, you feel you want to rest, but in fact going for a brisk walk or whatever is the thing that's going to stop the fatigue. But yeah, it's in a way I haven't had a lot of time in the week after the surgery, I was in a very bad way. So, I had this image in my head that recovering from the surgery would be lying in bed, reading, having visitors, drinking a lot of tea. Well, the first week after my surgery, for the first, I think, 5 days, I was vomiting 50 times a day. I mean, actually, 50, not 50, again, not 50 as in, it felt like 50, but 50 as in, the nurses were keeping count because they'd reported the doctors. So, there was not, it wasn't like I was sat there dwelling on stuff. It was like just daily activity, trying to eat meals, that kind of thing, was sort of taking up the time. Now I'm home, at least for a few days. I've got 4 more days at home before I return to hospital to start the chemo. I've got my kids, so I'm spending time with my kids. I went to visit a clinic today that does immunotherapy, so it was, that was quite a performance because there was a huge typhoon today. But I made it to the clinic and I spent an hour with the consultant asking very detailed questions about the treatment, immunotherapy treatment. Immunotherapy treatment is not a proven treatment I think in all countries, as far as I can tell. It's not covered by any kind of national health insurance scheme. So, a big focus for me in the future is going to have to be fundraising to pay for the immunotherapy because it's very, very expensive. Well, if it works, it's incredibly cheap.
Right.
If it works, it's like, very, very cheap. If it doesn't work, it's very expensive and it's unproven. So, and in fact, even when you have it, it's hard to tell if it's working or not because you have it along with your other treatments. So in my case, I'm going to be having it along with the chemotherapy. So it's hard to say, if I do get a good result, it's hard to say this is because of the immunotherapy, not the chemotherapy. The chemotherapy is covered by my Japanese National Health Insurance. The immunotherapy isn't. So, yeah.
It's. I'm not to get onto these details. Maybe it's not important, but it's national. It's national insurance. I didn't realize that. I was wondering what system they had.
I didn't have any kind of private medical care at all.
Most people don't, right? Or how does it work?
In Japan, there's basically a compulsory national health insurance system, although there's like I think a few percent of people in Japan opt out for various reasons, and they're not pursued. The money's not taken off them or anything like that. And Japan has possibly the best results for health treatment in the world. They're definitely up there in the top 5 for most things. With cancer, I do believe they're number 1. It's hard to get very good comparative statistics, but they do seem to be number 1 for general cancer treatment in the world. The surgical techniques here are kind of more advanced than any other country. So that means the surgery has more chance of success, less chance of complications, shorter recovery times, for example, than other countries. And the health insurance here is sort of you pay a monthly contribution. It is means tested, so low income families pay very little, and the idea is that the treatment cost, 70% of it is paid for by the government using the national health insurance money. But unlike England and America, the price of medical care here is highly regulated, just like in France. So in Japan, every hospital, whether it's private or not private, has to be run as a non-profit. Every 2 years, the Japanese Ministry of Health meet together with a big panel of doctors and decide the maximum allowable prices for everything that pharmaceutical companies and medical equipment companies and medical service companies are allowed to charge. So unlike the UK, where we have a national health service that is basically being held to ransom by pharmaceutical companies, for example, who can charge the national health service as much as they like, in Japan it's very, very highly regulated. So Japan actually spends less money as a country on healthcare than as a percentage than both England and the US, and yet statistically they have better medical outcomes, they have a better level of care. France is similar in that the French government are very strict about what medical companies can charge. In England, we have the National Health Service, which is one of the earliest national health systems in the world, which is set up after World War II. I believe it was actually set up as a job creation scheme, more as a sort of health system. I believe it was sort of during the war there had been essentially full employment, and after the war it was decided to put money into public projects to get to do job creation. But in England we have, the National Health Service is a breaking point essentially. The costs are spiraling out of control because the pharmaceutical companies and medical equipment companies, and particularly medical service companies, are allowed to charge such extortionate rates, and because the government are always desperate to get their health statistics in good order, they tend to spend a lot of money on outsourcing. So they have a lot of agency nurses, for example. They'll have agency staff will come in at weekends to hospitals to try and get waiting lists down, because in England there's always been controls about waiting lists, how long are people waiting for things. In Japan, I don't think they have a concept of a waiting list. I arrived back in Japan. The next day, I got to see a surgeon, and he actually booked me in for surgery the following day. In the morning, I decided to postpone it for a week. I asked him, is it safe to postpone for a week? And he said it was, after a lot of deliberation. But so there's no concept here of waiting for treatment. You get the treatment straight away, basically. There's no sort of waiting list.
That answers the question I was also wondering about even back in July when you were in the UK and you had told me you were going to go back to Japan. And I remember wondering, like, okay, in this case, you kind of have the choice of two countries. I wonder which is the better choice. Or but now I see among the reasons that you would choose for Japan and why, in terms of quality of care, you're in a good place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does seem the process here has been very quick. I got in for surgery quickly. I got to see the specialist quickly. I got in for surgery quickly. I've now been got the reservation for the chemotherapy very quickly. There have been no delays whatsoever.
By the way, you've been a decade, right, at this point in Japan, but I'm wondering how you follow everything that's being said and are able to keep up in the hospital.
So in Japan, it seems that basically doctors and above, so kind of doctors, surgeons, consultants, their English is pretty good.
Okay.
So I've been generally communicating with English. At my hospital, quite a few of the nurses speak pretty good English. Some don't. I've been coping okay. My Japanese is very poor. My understanding is okay. And of course, when there's things like medical terms that have come from English, I can kind of, get a grasp of that or even the nurses who speak very little English, some of the medical terms they know in English. So yeah, the language hasn't been a big barrier. The kind of things where it is a barrier are things like when I've been trying to get second opinions and looking online, a lot of the websites are in Japanese only, and I can't. My Japanese is definitely not good enough to read them, and of course I'm usually searching with Google in English, so I'm not finding all these different clinics or whatever. I can only find the ones that happen to have a website in English. The language thing and the cultural thing has not been such a big deal, partly because the healthcare here is so good. Things do work very well. I have heard of lots of people with cultural issues here. In England, medical treatment, the real focus is what they call patient-centered treatment, where a patient is very, very well informed about what's happening and what future steps are. Whereas in Japan, it's very much the doctor, the surgeon, the consultant, the oncologist, or whatever. They're in a top of a hierarchy, and it's not generally felt as important to be explaining to a patient what's going to happen, for example. So you're often told on the day that something's going to happen. Now, in my case, that hasn't applied because I've informed myself very well, and I've asked I asked the right questions and I asked them early on, and I've made it very clear I'm not proceeding with things unless I know what's going on. So in my case, that's been okay. I've at every stage I felt I've known what's happening. I've known a few steps ahead because I've been researching online the kind of things that can be offered to me, and I've therefore been able to ask those questions to the consultants of with this surgical procedure, what's the recovery going to be like? Whatever it is. So yeah. To answer your question, really, there hasn't been a big language barrier. Hasn't really been a cultural barrier for me. So it was definitely the right decision, and it wasn't really much of a decision. It was sort of, I had to be back here because I've basically lived here over the past 10 years. So, my friends in the UK have sort of moved out of my hometown during that time. So I don't really have a lot of people concentrated in that hometown anymore. Whereas I sort of know far more people here, and I felt I need to be here. It's my family belongs in Japan, more than anything else.
Yeah, and your life is there.
It's there, although I'm not sure what form my life is gonna take. Assuming I do survive for the foreseeable future.
I mean, in Tokyo, you have a community. Years ago at this point, I got to meet some of the people from that community, and I know as well as anyone, over the years that can change communities, and even us as individuals. We may have less friends as we get older, I don't know. But I'm curious, in the communities you're part of there, has anyone gone through cancer and what you're going through? I'm wondering if anyone is,
Several people have definitely had family members who have had cancer, and sometimes some who have survived, some who have not survived. I am, in a way, I'm fortunate in that I guess I'm quite an active member in several different communities. Mm-hmm. You and I are both sort of active in the hacker communities. Mm-hmm. Although, it's been a few years since I've been sort of giving talks at hackathons and things. But so that's just been wonderful. I mean, it's just been incredibly moving to get that support. I mean, because I see it through the fundraising. I've a couple of hundred people have donated to my fund for the cancer treatment because I'm having this this treatment that's not covered by Japanese health insurance. And even if I were just having treatment covered by Japanese health insurance, there are still a lot of very big costs. I mean, that I'm not earning money while I'm being treated for cancer, for example. So it's been amazing to have these communities. I've been involved a little bit with the Raspberry Pi community. So Raspberry Pi is a credit card sized Linux based computer that was designed to help get kids back into being creators of technology, not consumers. And I've received huge support from the CEO of Raspberry Pi, Evan Upton, and his wife Liz Upton, who is the communications director at Raspberry Pi. Those communities have helped a lot. I've been a small business owner in Tokyo, and I set up a small business community for people here who, a sort of a one-person business or whatever. That community has been incredibly helpful. So, I mean, that's been, it's anything you put into community comes back tenfold. In this case, 1,000-fold. It's so important that we work hard to build good communities because, as you say, yes, communities change, but the memories are long. I think, the memories are long, and it's been incredible, sort of the support I've got, the emotional support, intellectual support, and financial support, because I'm trying to raise the funds for the treatment. It's been an incredible demonstration of the power of community. For various complex reasons, I happen to have telephone access to a British doctor and a British nurse who basically could give me telephone consultations. Then they're not able to provide me healthcare, but it's just this is because I have a family member working for a big multinational, and the family member, their healthcare package includes telephone access to medical staff for cases where a family member is either terminally ill or has a life-threatening condition. And that has been probably the biggest support of all, has been being able to talk to a medical person who's not involved in my care. So they're not bound by like a protocol. They're allowed to express an opinion. So it's quite, medical people are very, very rightly reluctant to express opinions. Very, and that's very, very, very proper, because medicine is about fact and outcomes, and often it's very unwise to express an opinion and then later on a test result proves the opposite, whatever. And medical professionals who are involved in your treatment will be typically saying things are case by case, things are wait and see. We can't diagnose your situation accurately until the test results, for example. However, I've had telephone access to an incredibly experienced medical team who do give me opinions and do talk about friends who have had similar treatment or whatever. So that's been just incredible. Just to sort of call them up, talk through what's happening to me. That's been an amazing thing, and get the opinions. So when I was in the UK waiting for test results, I already knew, based on subjective medical opinion, that they were going to be bad, and that made a big difference. It was still a big shock. It was still hard to accept, but I I knew the situation was very bad from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't like, going to the medical appointments to get the results and being full of all false hope. I knew they were going to be bad because, medical professionals had told me based on decades of experience that I should be expecting bad results based on, things I had told them. So that helped a lot, really. The support makes a big difference. My friends have been very supportive. Many of them don't have any experience or knowledge of cancer, and of course it's difficult because I'm now quite knowledgeable about my situation, and you have to do a lot of explaining to people, and people have questions that very, very reasonable when you don't know about cancer. Why can't you do X, Y, and Z, for example, or and like I said at the beginning of this conversation, we hear a lot of good news about cancer. A lot of cancers are very, very treatable, especially in early stages. And people hear about a certain treatment and so say, "Oh, I saw this treatment. Can't you have this treatment? You should go and look into it." And maybe I've already looked into it, or I know a reason why it's not applicable in my case. Like I said, liver cancer treatments are not necessarily applicable to someone who's got a secondary cancer that spread to the liver, or whatever.
Matthew, I'm very aware of the time for your sake in terms of getting sleep, so I don't want to keep you longer. What I would say is we'll stop here for now. And also, if you want to speak again, I have much smaller questions about your day-to-day and
Sure.
and stories from the past. I would love to do a different kind of podcast, maybe, but we can keep that for one of these coming days before you go back to the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily in conclusion, but a couple of things I think are important to say is that if our listener does get a cancer diagnosis, I think there are 3 steps to take. I mean, and for any kind of crisis situation, and the first step is tell some people. Don't try to tackle it alone. Tell some people, and if you're the kind of person, I guess, like I was, is not very good at telling people things like this, play whatever mind games you can with yourself to trick yourself into getting the temporary strength to tell some people. Step 2 is really get the facts. Listen carefully. Ask lots of questions. Don't be afraid to ask the same questions again and again until you understand really what the situation is, what the options are. The good news is if a cancer is found early, there are many, many options. The later the cancer's found, the fewer options there are. And then the third thing is make a plan. Make a plan of what you're going to do. And your plan might be that you're going to take things day by day. I mean, that's still a plan. It might be that you're going to look for the sort of things that might be coming up in the future and see how you can prepare yourself for them. So that would be my advice. I'm 2 months into knowing I've got cancer. My prognosis is very, very bad. However, there's still hope. But based on my current experience, doing those 3 steps makes a big difference. So kind of telling some other people, getting the right information, make sure you're dealing with as much as possible with facts. And 3 is kind of making a plan of some description. There might be a written plan or whatever. And then another thing I'd say is that if you know someone with cancer, might be a family member or friend, or maybe you have a friend who has a family member with cancer, please do repeatedly try to help them. It's often difficult for people to ask for help. People might not know what help they need to ask for. People might have a lot of emotional issues around asking for help. People might be in denial. There's definitely a significant percentage of people who get a cancer diagnosis who are in denial. But if you have a friend with cancer or a family member with cancer, there's so much you can do to help in the practical day-to-day things, because their mind is on a lot of stuff. You could do some things to help out with them. Could be as simple as offering to do shopping for them. And again, it's the thing is to repeatedly offer, because particularly if they're in the early stage of the cancer treatment or in a particularly bad time, they might just feel that they're in this nightmare. They can't even deal with arranging for someone to help with them. A lot of people just need someone to talk to. There might be. There's unlimited things you could potentially do to help someone. Looking after their children, doing shopping for them, helping clean the house, whatever. Because our day-to-day life continues.
Yeah,
it's a deeply good thing to help other people, and to it's a very rewarding use of your time to better directly help someone. I've in the past I've tried to help out with people, and it's been massively rewarding. So maybe that's a good place for us to end. And of course I'm trying to fundraise for my treatment. So if our listener would like to click on the link, and they can read about my situation, and I'd be incredibly grateful for any donation, and small donations make a big difference as well, because other people see the donations and are more likely to donate. And big amounts of money come from lots of small donations. So
links will be up on the website, I'll add the rest in post, as we say.
Great.
You've been listening to Matthew Dons in Tokyo, Japan, and his struggle with cancer. Go to Matthew, MATTHEWDONS, Dons.org. That takes you to GoFundMe, and you can join the many people who've come forward, as he mentioned, friends and strangers alike, to help support his GoFundMe to get funding for treatment. The beautiful music on today's podcast, in reverse order: Clean Pete, Misha Mishenko, My Bubba and Me. All are available via the links if you go to realitiespodcast.com. Each group is labeled with a link. Go there, get the music. This podcast is published under a CC BY SA 4.0 license and edited by me. If you enjoyed it, the thing to do would be to subscribe. And when you subscribe, you get every new episode as it comes out. That's as it should be. That's my big wish. Also, as Matthew reminds me, to encourage you, listeners, to write a review for Realities Podcast in the iTunes store or wherever you get your podcasts. When you write a review and you leave the stars, the why I enjoy this, if that's the case, that helps me get found, that helps more people share in this experience. And for whatever reason, that is the goal here, to share experiences. Okay, thank you very much for listening. I will speak to you again very soon. Goodbye.